All right. Hi, everyone, and good evening. Welcome. We're so glad you're here tonight. My name is Alyssa Jovita, and I am our Associate Director of Admission at Rollins College. And we're excited to talk through financial aid tonight with you. I'm so glad that you have chosen to spend your evening with us. So tonight we're going to cover how to file the FAFSA. We will cover understanding all of your aid options and a whole lot more in the next hour. So a couple things, if you have questions throughout the session, feel free to drop them in the chat function. We'll do our best to address as many as we can tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues here that are joining us tonight from our financial aid office, and they will introduce themselves and we'll get started.
All right. My name is Melissa Tumaliru. I'm Associate Director of Financial Aid here at Rollins. I've been at Rollins for just over a year, but I've been in this financial aid college access realm for about a decade. And I'm joined by Marissa. She's going to be moderating the chat tonight. So ask her all your really good, really hard questions, because I'm sure she's going to do a great job answering them.
Thank you. I will try my best. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Like Melissa said, my name is Marissa. I am a financial aid counselor at the financial aid office with Rollins. Rollins is actually my alma mater. I did my bachelor's and then moved on to grad school there. I'm doing my second bachelor's with Rollins right now. So I'm very excited to be here with you tonight. Feel free, like it's been said before, to send the questions by chat and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, I believe, Melissa. So I will also bring up some questions that I receive that are in general in nature for all to hear that Melissa can answer for everyone to hear. I do speak Spanish, so if we have Spanish speakers tonight, feel free to send me your questions in Spanish and I'll try my best.
All right, let's get started. We are also recording this, so we will have that available as well. All right. So let's start off. What is financial aid? This is what we all are here to really learn about and really know about. Financial aid is kind of an umbrella term and basically means that's all the money, the aid from a variety of sources that you're using to pay for that student's college education. It comes from a wide variety of places. Most aid is going to be, when we talk about financial aid, is going to be need-based, meaning that it depends on the family's financial situation. But some aid is going to be based on academics or talent, achievement, merit, something that you have done to earn that money. We're going to talk about those, what comprises those categories here in a minute. But when we think about financial aid is really an umbrella term that's composed of a couple different categories. So when we think about financial aid, we definitely have some things that we hear often in the office. This is one of my favorite slides in the whole presentation, and you'll see why. We often hear, oh, I'm just going to wait until I get information on my admission application. While tonight we're going to be speaking about Rollins specifically, all the information that's in this session can be applicable to any school. So if I'm waiting on that one school, man, I just haven't heard back from them, I'm going to wait until they get back to me in May or April, and then I'm going to worry about financial aid. You may be missing some financial aid opportunities that had deadlines much earlier. So when we think about doing our admission application, we also want to be keeping in mind what our financial aid deadlines are and pursuing those avenues as well in conjunction with that admission application at the same time. My favorite one that I hear often is, I make too much money. There was actually a post in the New York Times over the weekend about the misconception of I make too much money to receive financial aid. We like to say in our office, if you make $1 million a year, then yeah, you maybe make too much money. But if you make some number less than that, go ahead and fill out the FAFSA the first year. It's going to take you a little bit of time, but that's all you're going to be out. If you decide in future years, hey, this wasn't worth it, we don't get any from the school that we're at, that's okay. You don't have to renew it, but it's good to kind of have an understanding of what that target number is going to be for you, what options your school has, what options Rollins is going to give you. We love to see those FAFSAs and review them. So we like to see applicants for financial aid as much as possible, and then you can make that assessment if it's worth your time again in future years. The FAFSAs or the application's too intrusive, takes too long to complete. While it is true, it does take a little bit of time. This is something that you can easily have done in half an hour, and you could receive some money from the financial aid office for that. It is gonna ask some questions. It is gonna ask some tax-related questions, income, asset-related questions. There's no way around that. That's what we're using to generate a financial aid offer. But it is well worth the time, and it can be well worth the time. The last thing that a misconception we often hear is I'm just going to call the FAFSA people. So while there is FAFSA people, the Department of Education are FAFSA people, they're typically not people who are going to help you with your financial aid. They're really there to troubleshoot the FAFSA. If you're doing the FAFSA and you're like, man, I can't get this number to save in the box, or let's say that you did your FSA ID, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but you forgot what your password is and you can't log in, that's a great person. FAFSA people, the Department of Ed, those are great people to help solve those questions or those problems. If your question is, I really need more money from this school, or what's on the FAFSA doesn't reflect my actual reality today, you want to direct those questions to the financial aid offices, because we're receiving those FAFSAs. We're going to be able to review them and figure out, okay, here's where an adjustment we can make, here's not an adjustment, and see if there's something that we can do about that. The people at the FAFSA, they're not going to be able to help you with the actual numbers in the form. We're the ones, the financial aid office, are going to be the ones that are going to help you with that. So let's talk about where financial aid comes from. You've probably have heard this, that it comes from a couple different places. The first is the federal government. That's what you're going to get by doing that FAFSA. You're eligible for some aid based on what's reported there. The other piece is the state government. Here in Florida, we have a lot of really great state aid programs. If you're not from Florida, look around in what your state offers. Several states have a complementary or equal kind of programs that are available for students in their state. So definitely take a look at that. Institutions at Rollins, we're going to talk about the different aid that we offer, but institutions have a lot of, generally have a lot of funding. That's a really great place to look. And then the last and probably the most important piece are those private sources. We're looking for those scholarships at different organizations, communities, my local church. I'm talking to my high school guidance counselor to see what kind of scholarships my student can apply for. There's lots of different opportunities, lots of different scholarships that are open right now for applications. Now is a great time to start looking for them. Okay, so let's talk about scholarships as a whole. I've said this a couple times, but I want to touch base on it just a little bit more clearly. So scholarships are gift aid, money that doesn't have to be paid back. And this is something that I'm given because I have done something. I have academic merit. I have good test scores. I have a good GPA. I've taken AP classes. I've done well on my AP exams. I'm an IB diploma, whatever it is. I've done something really well. Or it's something that I'm really talented at. I'm a really great flute player and I'm going to get a music scholarship. I run track and I am going to be on the track team, or whatever the case may be. This is aid that I'm getting because I have done something as a student. And this is considered non-need based. So even if I don't fill out the FAFSA, I as a student may be eligible to win scholarships, both from institutions or from outside sources, as we talked about earlier. So this is definitely a category that we want to utilize. Here at Rollins, this information is all on our website, so you can always refer to it later. But this gives you an idea of what our academic scholarships breakdowns are kind of looking like. We know that, the College Board and the ACT have canceled a lot of tests, and that students, not particularly seniors, have gotten to take all of the tests that they are that they wanted to, or maybe they had registrations canceled. We definitely want you to try your best. We want you to take the test. We always encourage students to take it multiple times if possible, but we know that that's not possible in every situation. So this is kind of our guide and our framework. We definitely, when we're evaluating for scholarships, are looking at the whole application that students are submitting, that whole admissions application. There is not a separate scholarship application at Rollins. So we are really looking at everything that's in there, but this kind of gives you a framework of what we're looking for. Test score waived applicants are eligible to apply. You can see the categories there that they are eligible for. And then the other bullets at the top, you'll see that we do have a lot of aid that are in other categories, athletic, music, art. We also are a Bonner Scholars school. Marissa's coming in. We got a question? Oh, I think you're still muted. I don't think I can hear you.
Always be playing with the button. No, I just wanted to ask if Elisa had something to add. I believe she had some information also to share on the slides. I just wanted to pitch in for that little reminder.
Yeah, not too much. Melissa has covered a lot of it. I just think it's important to note that at Rollins you will automatically be considered for all of these during the admission review. So no separate scholarship application, which is really nice. Up to $30,000 for the partial merit scholarships. The Alphon Scholars Program. We definitely encourage our seniors to apply by November 15th to be considered for the Alphon Scholarship, which, as you can see, is our full tuition, room and board opportunity. We will host a separate scholarship weekend where we do interviews and invite, high achieving students to campus to compete for this scholarship opportunity. So if you are falling within the ranges that you see on the screen for the Alphon Scholars program, then definitely encourage you to try to complete that application by November 15th.
Thanks. Thanks for that. I didn't mention the deadline. That was a good jump in there. All right, so let's talk about other scholarship sources. So we have a lot of we want to talk about like Florida State scholarships. I know not everybody on our webinar is from Florida, but this gives us kind of an opportunity to talk about what those options are. So the first and foremost is a National Merit or a Corporate Scholar Program through the National Merit Program. This, if you are a National Merit Scholar anywhere in the country, the state of Florida has some additional funding for any Florida school. So at Rollins, that translates into about $25,000 of financial aid, and we can put that in addition to any merit scholarship that you may win here at Rollins as well. So Benequister is a really amazing program. Again, you do not have to be a Florida resident for that program, but you do need to be either a National Merit Scholar or a Corporate Scholar within the National Merit umbrella of that program. The other big category that we see a lot of students come to Rollins with is the Florida Bright Futures program. So there's two levels to that, the academic scholars, the medallion scholars. At a public school, that's going to pay for 100% of tuition and 75% of tuition at those two levels. At Rollins, it works a little differently, or any other private school in the state of Florida, in that it pays $211 per credit hour for the academic, plus a $600 per semester book stipend, $300 per semester, $600 total. And then the medallion scholars pays $158 per credit hour at Rollins. So that translates to about $7,000 a year for the academic scholars and about $5,000, a little over $5,000 for the medallion scholars, those two levels. The test score and test score requirements are changing for this academic year, for this upcoming 21-22 school year. So for the academic scholars, you can see 1330 or a 29 on the ACT, 1330 on the SAT, 3.5 GPA, still need those 100 community service hours. Medallion scholars is going to be that 1210 or 25 and that 3.0. The important thing about this is to really make sure you get your community service hours done, and then secondly, to do the application on the state of Florida website. A lot of high schools help students complete this application, so you want to make sure that you're working with your counselor so you can get that done ahead of time. We have students every year who have done all of the requirement but don't do the application, so we can't give them the funding. One more pitch to really look for those outside scholarship sources. FastWebScholarships.com are both excellent resources. You can go in and really personalize your profile. They'll send you scholarships that you are applicable for. But my other big advice on this is to definitely look around in your community. What are those opportunities at your high school, your church, your community center? They're going to have higher likely hit rates for you. So I definitely encourage you guys to look around for those opportunities. Oh, There we go. So that was scholarships. The next big category of funding, our second big category of funding of 4, is grants. So this again is gift aid. It's money that does not have to be paid back. And it's usually awarded on the basis of financial aid. Here at Rollins, the FAFSA is required for this. We have a couple different grant sources that we're able to award students. We do require the FAFSA. So here you can see a few of them. Coming from the state, if you are a state of Florida resident going to a private school, you can be eligible for the EASE grant. You have to be, or the parent has to be a state of Florida resident for 12 months prior to the start of school, which if you're graduating from a Florida high school is probably true. And so that can be 2,841. The Florida Student Assistance Grant is for needy students. We are going to be looking at the FAFSA for that to determine which students are eligible for that. And each school can award up to $3,260 per student. They may not award that. They may award some amount less than that, but that is the most that a student could get for that program at any school in the state of Florida. The only caveat that I'm going to put out there on those two things is that we know the pandemic has had a really a big impact on the state of Florida and the revenue that our state has. These two both go through budgetary sessions in the legislature every year to determine amounts and criteria for the next year. So this is the amount for this current academic year for 2021. We do not know what that amount or if that amount will be for 21-22. So we are really hoping they stick around, but we don't know. The other big category you'll hear is the Pell Grant. People often talk about getting FAFSA money. This is typically what they're referring to. Again, this comes from doing the FAFSA, putting that income, those asset information out there. This is something that's federally determined by the FAFSA algorithm. When you do your FAFSA, if you are eligible for a Pell Grant, it will say on the student aid report, that final confirmation that you get, it will say if you're eligible for a Pell Grant and what amount it is. It's a sliding scale. It's not an all or nothing. The Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, generally, if I'm eligible for a full Pell Grant, I may be eligible for that Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. If I'm not eligible for a Pell Grant, or if I'm not eligible for a full Pell Grant, it is unlikely that I will get that. The schools determine how much, but $4,000 is the maximum amount that that grant can be. The next piece is the institutional resources. So Rollins has a substantial Rollins grant program they're able to award out of, again, depending on FAFSA information, admission information. There's a couple different factors we're using to evaluate for that. And then the other big piece is a Florida prepay or a 529 plan. If you've put aside money in a Florida prepay plan or a 529 plan in another state, we definitely accept those. We are happy to receive those. We often get questions of, will a 529 impact the other financial aid that I'm eligible for? In our case, the 529 or Florida prepay is a payment. So we are not going to adjust your aid because you have this. Where it will show up is if the 529 or the Florida prepay is an asset that is held by the parent, then that will show up on your FAFSA because that's something that you will need to report. If you have specific questions about your personal situation on that, we can always talk about that. But I know that often creates a little bit of confusion for some families. But if you have Florida prepay, Rollins accepts it. The third big category of things that we have are loans or financial aid. This is something that the student is going to borrow or the parent is going to borrow to pay for college expenses. Generally, repayment is going to begin after education. So after you graduate or you drop out, stop out of school, is when you will generally start paying those student loans back. And this is something that we really want to talk about. We're only going to borrow what is needed because we need to think about the future. So if I'm borrowing $10,000 my first year, that's going to be $40,000 at the end of 4 years. We don't want you to stick around any longer than 4 years. We want you to get out, graduate, and go conquer the world. So we need to think about, okay, 40,000, is that doable? Is that not doable? Conversely, if I find myself in a situation where I'm borrowing my federal loans and I have to borrow an outside loan of 15,000, where I'm borrowing 20,000 a year, is that really going to be a great investment when I multiply that by all the years that I'm going to be in school? Again, at Rollins, we're hoping that's only 4. So let's talk about loans specifically. Within the federal program, the federal direct loans, there's kind of 2 categories of loan, but they kind of function together, subsidized and unsubsidized. Subsidized means that the government is going to subsidize the interest on that loan while I'm in school. So I am not accruing interest as a student who's taken this loan out. I'm not accruing interest on that loan while I'm in school. Unsubsidized loans are accruing interest. So based on what your FAFSA says, what that income, what those assets say, you may be awarded some portion of subsidized or unsubsidized loans, or both, or one, kind of depending on what's listed there. You can see the federal maximums each year: $3,500 for your first year, $4,500 as a sophomore, $5,500 for junior and senior status. You can definitely research some more information. We'll have a link at the end of this for studentaid.gov, the same place where you do your FAFSA, but that will have all of the details about these loan programs, interest rates, maximum lifetime borrowing limits, all those kinds of things that I definitely encourage you to check out if you think you may need to borrow some loans. Beyond the direct loan program, if you realize, hey, I might need some additional loan funding for my student, is the Parent Plus loan, the parent loan for undergraduate students. This is a loan that a parent would take out for their student's education. So the loan is going to be in the parent's name. It's going to require a parent credit check. So that is always an option that parents can undergo. You can also look for private loans. We always encourage the federal loans first because they have slightly more competitive interest rates, especially this year with coronavirus. The interest rates dropped on both the direct loans and on the plus loans. But really, that's something that you guys, if you feel like you're going to need additional loan funding, can research. You may have a credit union or a bank or something that's able to offer more competitive rates. That's a decision that you guys get to make. We always encourage the direct loan first, and then additional federal loans if needed. And then this brings us to our fourth category. Our last category of funding is employment sources. So this is the work study that we hear about. This is where you work on campus, you get a little paycheck, and you can utilize that for your pocket money, going out to eat, or your pizza money, or your I need to buy shower shoes and shampoo kind of money. So federal work study program at Rollins, we have hundreds of jobs on our campus. About half of them are federal work study jobs. We have lots and lots of students who are working work study jobs on campus. So this is, again, would be determined, eligibility would be determined based on the FAFSA information. But like I said, only half of our jobs are work study jobs. So if you are a student who really wants to work when you're on campus, you can still work. There's lots of opportunity. And some students are going to work 2 jobs. They may be answering phones in our office. Sometimes when you call us, you may talk to some of them. And also give tours on the weekend as another job on campus. So we have lots of opportunities to work. That kind of covers both that federal work study and the institutional work programs. And then the state of Florida also has a work program. From the Rollins perspective, this all falls under the umbrella of student employment. So they're really working with students and figuring out what's going to be the best on-campus job for them, and they're able to help guide them to the appropriate job, or give them ideas of, hey, you would be a really great fit over here. I think this would be a great program for you. And general work study works just like any other job. You have to apply for it, you got to interview. But we also know that as work study, if our students come to us and say like, hey, I've got a really big calculus test tomorrow, can I study today? We can say, okay, yep, come back later in the week and we can work up those hours. Work study is a pretty flexible opportunity. I definitely encourage it if your student is interested in it. Okay, so let's talk FAFSA. This is the most exciting part, my favorite part personally. FAFSA. So FAFSA opened October 1st, which was today's the 6th, 5 days ago. So excited already. This is what we're going to use to really calculate that financial aid award, that financial aid offer, that information that's on there. So you can see what FAFSA stands for there. And this is really, if you remember anything from this presentation, this is the thing to remember or to take notes on. So there's a couple things that you're going to need. The first is your FSA ID. You will need one both for the student and for the parent if your student is dependent. So the student will need one. They're going to make it, log in, start the FAFSA. They're going to get rolling. The parent will also need one to sign it. You'll need a FSA ID. My recommendation is to make sure you write it down, save it in your notes, put it in your email, write it at lots of places, because you're going to need it every single year when you do the FAFSA. It's tied to your social security number, so if you forget it, it can be recovered, but it's just a little bit easier if you write it down and are able to pull that note back out than to try and reset it through the system. You'll also need your social security card for definitely the student and the parent. You'll need it to set up the FSA ID, but also you want to make sure that you have the correct social security number. Every year we have students who use the wrong social security number, and it just takes a little bit of time to resolve that. So to make things a whole lot simpler, a whole lot easier, it's helpful if you have the card in front of you, or maybe a tax return in front of you, so that you're able to copy the name and the social security number exactly as it is on the card. For the 21-22 school year, we're going to need our 2019 tax information, record of untaxed income, and for the 2019 year. So this we know is a couple years ago, but our recommendation is to use the data retrieval tool so that the FAFSA will automatically connect to the IRS, and that information will pull over into the FAFSA. This makes things so much simpler for us. If we need additional information, we know that it's already connected to the IRS. We know that the numbers that are on there are correct. It just simplifies everything. The IRS data retrieval tool can be a little finicky though, so if it's not liking the information you put in, try fiddling with the address just a little bit. It needs to match exactly what was on your tax return, even if it's incorrect. But if you're able to use that data retrieval tool, we highly recommend it. Records of untaxed income, records of assets, non-retirement assets, you'll need those as well. And then the last piece is the list of schools that the student is interested in. The FAFSA lets you list up to 10. We know that several students, especially at this point in the year, have lists that are much, much longer than 10. So feel free to, after you submit the FAFSA, you can log back in and change those schools. Just know that if you change anything else on the FAFSA, those previous schools that you took off will not receive your FAFSA, will not receive that FAFSA. So that's just one thing you want to keep in mind, is that you want to watch to see that all the schools get all the information that you need. Or that you want them to. My recommendation is always to put the schools that you're most interested in, most excited about, most likely to apply on there first, and then the ones that are kind of like the B list or the backups, we can put those on a little bit later. But we really want to make sure the schools that we're like, yes, I really want to come to Rollins, so we're going to put Rollins on there first because we're all on this webinar. A little bit more about the data retrieval tool. It's like I said, it'll import taxes directly onto that. It authenticates the identity. So we think it's a really nifty tool. Definitely encourage you guys to use it. It will prompt you to do it when you get to the parental information. So what is the expected family contribution? We hear this a lot. This is the factor that's used in determining financial need, and this will stay the same regardless of what schools that you're sending it to. It's an algorithm. You can look it up there. Look it up on Google. It's public information. It's an algorithm that assesses parent income, assets, student income, and student assets within different weights based on a variety of factors, and arrives at this EFC number. So it's a federal formula. So I like to say that this is what the government is expecting the family to pay. It may not be what a student actually pays. And in most cases, it's probably not going to be what a student pays. And that has a lot of factors to do with the financial aid package as a whole. What is important, though, is that this kind of gives us a guide and it helps us understand the picture of what the family circumstances are. So you can definitely look into more about expected family contribution if you would like. Okay, so let's talk about cost. Important thing to think about is that I know right now we're really focused on next year, presuming we're all seniors, or in 2 years if we're a little bit younger. But we also want to think about that college is not just 1 year. We're not just paying for 1 year. We want to think about 4 years because we want you to graduate in 4 years. We want you to have enough money to be here for 4 years. So when we're thinking about this, we want to acknowledge and know that college is not just a 1-year decision. It's something that we want you to get your degree from. So when we think about cost, we think about how much college is going to cost us. We want to keep that thought in the back of our head. So at Rollins, or at every school, you're going to have direct costs, you're going to have indirect costs, and kind of two different categories. Every school is required, if they're getting federal aid, is required to publish direct costs on their website. It may be a little hard to find, but it is there for every school. It's going to be your tuitions, your fees, your room and board, your housing and your meal plan is what room and board is. Those things are going to be published on the website. You're going to be able to find those for every single school. Similarly, you're also going to be able to find ballpark figures for indirect costs, books and supplies, personal miscellaneous, transportation is another big category you usually see. The direct cost is what the school is going to charge you to go there. So to show up at Rollins, September of next year, we're going to charge you tuition, we're going to charge you room and board. If you have, a chemistry class fee or something like that, we'll charge you those fees as well. But every school is going to have that published somewhere. The indirect cost, you could buy your books from our bookstore, you could buy it from Amazon, you could buy your computer through our bookstore, you could buy it at, Newegg or Best Buy or wherever you buy it. So those are things that we're not going to charge you. We are going to charge you the direct costs. So how do we figure out how much financial aid you all need? So we're going to take that cost of attendance that we just talked about on the previous slide, the costs. We're going to subtract out that expected family contribution. That's going to give us gross financial need. And that is what we are going to try and cover with the financial aid through the various sources, through your academic scholarship, through work study, through grants, through loans. That's what we're going to work towards. To get an idea or to get a ballpark of what my financial picture could look like, or my financial aid would look like, I encourage you to look at our net price calculator. Every college must provide a net price calculator. So they have to have their costs published. They also have to provide a net price calculator. So every school is going to have one. If you have already done your FAFSA, which it's October 6th, so it's time. If I've already done my FAFSA, I can put in my expected family contribution from my FAFSA into this net price calculator and get a ballpark of what my financial aid is going to look like. The more accurate the information, the more accurate the estimate. If I, am a younger student, it's not time yet, or I haven't done my FAFSA yet, it gives you can like walk through some questions and enter some kind of basic information. It won't be 100% exact, but it again will still be a ballpark and give you a pretty good idea of what you can expect. So you can do these net price calculators for your different schools and kind of see, okay, across the board, this is what we're looking at here, this is what we're looking at here. But I definitely encourage you, if you haven't already done it, to do it. So we're kind of wrapping up a little bit here, but I want to talk about a couple numbers that I want to make sure that we're able to highlight before we jump into our question and answer. So we've talked a lot about financial aid, and my heads may be spinning a little bit. I know my head's spinning a little bit, but the important thing to remember is that 95% of our freshman class received financial aid. 95% of our freshmen who are on our campus right now have received some sort of financial aid. So even again, if we're going back to that earlier slide where we talked about like, oh, I make too much money, this is too much hassle, I can't do it. Know that a lot of people are really benefiting from this, and you could be one of those people. So it is worth it. 25% of our class were Pell eligible. I know sometimes we get a little sticker shock of the number or the price tag of Rollins, but a quarter of our freshman class were also Pell eligible. So we definitely work really hard to be affordable for families. $75 million in financial aid available every year. And similarly, 25 million in scholarships were awarded in 1920. I think I saw a question come up earlier if there was a number or a limit on the number of scholarships that we have. We want to give scholarships to every student that's deserving. So 25 million is what we awarded in 1920. And then the most important thing, number 7, best value, and U.S. News and World Report. So before we open up for questions, a quick review of the timeline. Alyssa reminded us that November 15th is the deadline we are working towards for that early decision and that priority scholarship deadline. If you haven't finished your application, you got a little over a month to do that. So, get to it, write some really great essays, get some good recommendation letters and all the pieces that you need. You can always talk to your admission counselor if there's something that you're missing. But going back to the financial aid lens, verification, once you send us your FAFSA and you have been admitted to this school, you may be getting some requests for verification. If there's something that we need additional paperwork, additional documentation, it happens. Sometimes it happens randomly. We get notices from the federal government that FAFSAs require verification. We may select some for verification. So just know, watch your student's email. We'll be communicating primarily with the student on this. But if we are requesting additional information, you know, it's not for fun. It's because we have something that we need to look into. So definitely give us the information that we're requesting. And look for your financial aid letter. Financial aid letters typically go out, financial aid offers about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks after admission. So look again on the student's email. It'll be the email that's used on the FAFSA under the student for that. So that's where that will go. March, April, reply to those offers of aid. If you haven't done your state of Florida aid application, if that's relevant for you, make sure you do that. And then May 1, decision deadline day. So that's kind of May 1 in the summer. If you have outside scholarships, definitely let us know so we can plan for that and then complete any other steps that we need for financial aid or for admission, enrollment, you know, orientation, things like that. Okay. So that's going to bring us to some helpful websites. We talked about studentaid.gov, and that's both where you'll fill out the FAFSA and also a really great resource to learn about financial aid. They have a lot of information out there. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I encourage you to take a spin. We talked about FAFSA and scholarships. There's the Florida aid information, the Florida Bright Futures applications on that website. And then lastly, but not least, the Rollins financial aid website where you can get some more details about Rollins specifically that we may not have been able to cover. Last but not least, there's my contact info, Marissa and Alyssa. Feel free to email us, call us. We're definitely here to help, even if Rollins is not, you know, the place for you. We are here to help answer all of those questions. We really love talking about financial aid and love reviewing FAFSAs. Well, I don't know about Alyssa, but Marissa and I definitely do. So feel free to contact us and we can help answer any questions that you have. Even if you haven't been admitted, you haven't started your FAFSA, we're here for you. So I see that this chat is really exciting, but I would love to hear if we have any questions.
The chat is popping. We've received a lot of scholarship questions. I don't know if we want to address those first, Elisa, if you've identified a couple questions that we could bring up right now for all to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Let me scroll back up and try to grab a few. So let's see. Yeah, so Sweepa, I hope I'm saying your name right, asked about how merit scholarships are decided. Do we get them as long as we meet the criteria, or will it be out of a pool of those who qualify? So these are really good questions. As you can see on the screen, the range of the scholarships between the Achievement Scholarship and the Dean Scholarship, those are those partial merit scholarships that we're talking about. So automatic consideration for those. The test scores and the GPAs listed are kind of rough parameters, so it's not cut and dry. We're lucky at Rollins that we're able to have a very holistic review process, and so we want to get to know you as students. That's, you know, definitely what your experience at Rollins is going to be like, and so we want to make sure that our admission process also reflects that. And so, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know, an 1170 and a 3.1, you know, equals Centennial Scholarship necessarily. We're going to be looking at everything you submit. There was another question about GPA in the chat too. So when you see that 3.1 on the screen, that's on a 4.0 scale, and we're going to do a recalculated GPA for you. So we're going to look at all of your core coursework, so math, science, English, foreign language, and social sciences, and we're going to unweight that GPA. So that sounds unfair, right? So I know a lot of you in here are probably taking rigorous course loads of AP courses or IB curriculums. But it doesn't mean we're not paying attention to that. We absolutely are paying attention to the types of courses that your high school offers and the types of courses that you're choosing to challenge yourself with. So that all comes into this consideration of merit scholarships that you're awarded. So again, very holistic process. When we talk about, pools of scholarships, really the Alphon Scholars Pool is a bit more limited. I had mentioned in the chat, we award about 10 full tuition, room, and board scholarships every single year as a result of that scholarship weekend I mentioned a little bit earlier. But other than that, if you qualify for one of these based on our holistic process, you will be awarded that scholarship. Hope that helps. Any other, Marissa and Melissa, were there any other
I saw
scholarship
a bunch
questions?
of questions. Am I muted? Okay, I'm always muted. I saw a bunch of questions. I guess more clarity on the application process for the scholarships. I have some attendees who are under the impression that a separate application is needed to be considered for the scholarship, and especially regarding test scores. Can I submit test scores after I apply, or new test scores if I test higher after I turn in my first test scores?
Yeah, so I know that this is a hard year, especially for our seniors, just because there have been so many testing cancellations, or you just don't have access to testing sites and things like that. Test dates have been pushed back. You're not on the same timeline. We understand, and we absolutely empathize, this year especially, that you're going through a lot to try to complete these college applications. So we will work with you. And I think that's kind of the name of the game here, is we're going to be flexible with you. For instance, if you apply now and you choose to be a test optional applicant because maybe you have not taken an SAT or an ACT yet, or you're, maybe not in our range for admission or scholarship. And so you want to hold off for a little bit until you submit a test score. It doesn't all have to be submitted at the same time. So if you submit your application now as a test optional student, maybe you test next month, you haven't yet gotten an admission decision from us, but the test score that you took, you want it to be included in your application. I really encourage you guys to work closely with your admission counselor. So I am one of those people. We have several in our office, and our entire job is to make sure that we're working with students. Just like you, we are assigned by territory, so it depends where you're from. And we're here to help and kind of guide you through this really what can feel like a confusing process. If you applied to Rollins, you were admitted, and you were even awarded a scholarship, or maybe not awarded a scholarship. If you decide to test after that point, we do have a scholarship appeal process, and that will take place through the admission office as well. Again, you're going to work with your admission counselor. We'll walk you through what that scholarship appeal process looks like, but we'll be able to take a look at your application again with updated information and reconsider you for a scholarship, or at least a higher scholarship. So just know that we're not scary people. We are, here to help you and guide you through this process. So I can drop a link in the chat with the website that tells you who your admission counselor is based on territory, and just be sure to get to know us. We want to get to know you. So one other thing I'll add beyond the merit scholarships that are listed on the screen, I want to echo that all of our students that apply to Rollins, whether you apply with or without a test score, you're going to be considered for the range of the $10,000 to $30,000 in merit scholarship dollars. So, that we are not, penalizing students for not submitting a test score. You're going to still be considered for that full suite of merit scholarships.
And Alyssa, as a student,
Yep.
how do I know if I should apply? I tested, I have my scores. I don't know if it's best for me to apply as a test score waived applicant, or if I should submit my scores. Is that something I would be counseled on, or do I need to just apply the way that I think is best?
Yeah. So you can be counseled on that. So again, reach out to us if you're, questioning, like, I got a 25 on the ACT, should I submit that or not? We're happy to kind of guide you in the right direction. also with a 25, yes, you should submit that. Our middle 50% ranges for the ACT are 25 to a 30. So again, that's a middle 50% range. That, you know, we have students that have scores lower than that, and then again, we have students that score higher than that. So you know, we're happy to help you and kind of guide you in that right direction. It's not, again, cut and dry. It's not like if you have this, then you should submit a test score. If you don't have that, then you shouldn't submit a test score. You know, it is a holistic review process. It will also depend on your academic achievement in high school, the types of courses that you choose to take. So it's all kind of a balancing act in that sense. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. If you still have questions on scholarships, we welcome those.
Yeah,
I'm going to shift gears a little bit towards financial aid. We have some questions for Melissa.
I have one thing before you ask that. When you say,
go ahead.
I did see a question pop up. These scholarships are renewable as long as you meet the renewal criteria for each scholarship. The specific scholarship renewal criteria is listed on our website, but generally 24 credit hours a year, which is the easy one to get. And then each scholarship does have a GPA renewal requirement, but they are renewal eligible each year.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Melissa. And before we dive into financial aid, one more thing about the admission stage / application. Elisa, is the admissions office already reviewing applications? We have some attendees who they say they have applied, but they haven't heard back and they're not sure what their next step is.
Sure. Yeah. So we, for fall applicants, so for fall 2021, we have not started reviewing applications yet. So we'll start reviewing them pretty soon, this month. So the way it works is your notification date will depend on the round that you choose. So we didn't get too much into the admission process today, but if you apply early decision, Melissa had mentioned that the deadline is November 15th. You will hear back with an admission decision by December 15th. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. For regular decision applicants, our final deadline is February 1st, and we guarantee a decision by April 1st. Now that sounds like a really long time, but that's just the final notification date. You know, if you apply early, you very well, you know, may hear back much earlier. So that's why, you know, regardless of our final deadline, we still recommend that you complete your application by November 15th, even if you're just regular decision, which is the non-binding option. Early decision is our binding option. Which means that Rollins is your top choice. You definitely want to come if you get in, and it essentially means that you will withdraw applications that you submitted to other institutions and agree to enroll at Rollins. There are a lot of perks with it, you know, one of them being that early turnaround with an admission decision in December, which means like I wash my hands of this college search process before the holidays. You know, I get placed in my first semester courses before other students. So early decision can be a good option, but even if you don't go that route, just kind of have that November 15th deadline in your mind.
Thanks, Elisa. I think we're ready to move on to financial aid. Melissa, in terms of completing the FAFSA, we have been asked if, as we file FAFSA, should we include the value of our car and our home of residence as part of our asset information?
That is a great question. You do not include those two. If you have a secondary residence, a vacation home, a rental property, something like that, that is counted as an asset on the FAFSA. But the primary home that you live in, that is not counted on the FAFSA, and similarly, your car is not counted on the FAFSA. You this is not necessary for Rollins, but some schools like University of Miami here in Florida and some schools particularly in the Northeast will use what's called a CSS profile. It's sort of like a FAFSA, but a little bit more, a little bit extra questions on there. That is information that would be reported on there, but we don't need to know about that at Rollins. Don't put it on your FAFSA. Don't call us and tell us about the car that you drive. I don't want to know. I'm sure it's a very lovely car, but I don't need it for your financial aid.
Thank you very much. All righty. This is a really good one. Somebody wants clarification on what expected family contribution means.
Yeah, let's go. Let me see if I can go back to that slide. So expected family contribution is your EFC. This is what the FAFSA is going to spit out at us. So when we do the FAFSA, we list our income, we list our assets, we've connected it to the IRS, we've put all the information in there. It's going to generate what's called a student aid report. That's the form, but it's going to have an EFC figure on there. That figure, in combination with the other pieces that you've listed, is what we are going to use to determine what financial aid that you are eligible for. So for example, if my EFC, I'm pulling a number out of a hat, is $2,000, then that tells me that you're going to be eligible for some number of a Pell Grant. And then, because that's a federal determination based off my EFC, that Pell Grant is related to my EFC. But then I could also see as a financial aid counselor, okay, these are the other pieces that you are eligible for. Maybe you get, you're from Florida, so you can get an EASE grant. You're from, you had a Pell Grant, so maybe you get a Florida Student Assistance Grant. That helps us determine how do we put that package together as a financial aid office. Similarly, my EFC is going to be the same at every school. So when I'm making my decision, I can lay out my financial aid offers and I can compare them apples to apples or close to apples to see what the different schools are going to cost me. Maybe one school is more expensive, but they offered me more in scholarship, or maybe one school's cheaper, but they didn't give me any work study or something like that. So that EFC is really used to drive that financial aid package.
Perfect, thank you. And if I may add, I think an easy way to think of the EFC is it's just an index that measures a family's financial strength. So the higher the EFC means you have a lower level of financial need, means you qualify for less grants, less funding of that type. And the lower the EFC means you have a greater financial need. So the higher your chances of being eligible for grants and other types of funding.
Index.
Yes. Melissa, this is a really common question that you love to get. Does a 529 account count as an asset?
I was really hoping by throwing it in here, we would cover it. But so 529, if a 529 or Florida Prepay 529 plan is owned by the parent, it is a reportable parental asset, or owned by the student, which up on the student side. Those are reportable assets on the FAFSA. If like grandma or auntie or someone else owns it, I do not report it because I am not the owner of it. But if it is owned by me as the parent, owned by the student, it will show up under the parent asset or the student asset on the FAFSA. When so let's pretend that I'm a senior. I'm going to put that on my FAFSA as an asset. I go to college in my freshman year, and let's say I spent the entire 529 that year for my student. And I'm renewing the FAFSA, that is income for that year, 2020, 2021, whatever that year is. So that may show up on a later FAFSA as income having been used as well. But that is, if I'm a parent and I have a 529 for my child, that is a reportable asset that I should put on the FAFSA.
Thank you, Melissa. We have a few more on FAFSA. Should I file FAFSA if I am not applying for need-based aid?
Yeah, so if you know 100%, I don't need any need-based aid, I've got my secret millions that I'm going to use to fund my child's education, don't worry about the FAFSA. If you know you're not going to use it, you're not going to need it, don't do it. My advice is always, though, especially if I'm a senior getting ready to have a college student, is do it the first year just to see what it says. Because you never know. I had a family that I worked with earlier this year, and dad was like, oh, I make a lot of money. And he had an older student who went to college at another institution somewhere not in Florida that was much, much cheaper than Rollins. So he said, like, we didn't get any money for that kid. I'm not going to get any money at Rollins. And I said, well, listen, fill it out and let me be the judge of what you're eligible for. So, he filled it out, and it turns out the situation had changed over a couple of years. His financial picture was a little bit different than what he was thinking that it was. And we were actually able to give him some substantial financial aid that he was not anticipating. So my advice is always do it the first year. And then if it says, hey, it's not worth our time, not worth our effort, you don't have to renew it. You don't have to do it the other couple of years. But the first year at least gives you a ballpark idea of what you can be looking at, what you can be expecting at Rollins. Or you can always do the net price calculator. Maybe a little bit easier, maybe a little bit quicker, a little less work, and that can give you a ballpark idea too. So maybe you do the net price calculator and then you realize, hey, I'm only looking at merit money from Rollins, and that gives you your answer as well.
Great, thank you. Looks like I have two more for now. Let's see. So can you speak a little bit to citizenship situations in terms of applying for FAFSA? We have some attendees where the student is a U.S. citizen, but the parents are not, and they're not residing or filing taxes in the U.S. Can this type of student file a FAFSA?
Yeah, that's a really great question. FAFSA filing is dependent on the student's citizenship status. So they need to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. The FAFSA studentaid.gov has a list of what those different categories are, so you can see if that applies to you. But it's based on the student's status. So if the student was born here and they are a citizen, for example, they are able to fill out the FAFSA regardless of the parent's status. If the parents have social security numbers, they can utilize the FSA ID to sign it. If the parents do not have social security numbers here in the US, it will give you an option that they can hand sign. They will print a form at the end and hand sign it and mail it into the FAFSA. Keep in mind that that process of mailing and the will take a little bit longer to process because they have to match it up with the correct FAFSA. It just takes a little, and it has to get there. So it just takes a little bit longer. It's not as instant as using a FSA ID, but certainly lots of people do that every year. We have lots of students who do that every year, or whose parents do that every year. So it's not an uncommon thing. And the student is, if the student is still again, a citizen or one of those eligible non-citizens as defined by the Department of Ed, then they can still get financial aid, they can still do a FAFSA.
Very useful information. Okay, Melissa, one more that I think is going to be relevant to a lot of our attendees, considering our current climate, as we're in the middle of a pandemic. We received a question: what happens if my financial situation has changed this year because of COVID? We know FAFSA requires information from 2 years ago, right? 2018. So what do we do with that discrepancy?
Yeah, Marissa knows this is my favorite question. We do get this question a lot. So correct. FAFSA is going to use 2019 information, but 2020 has been, a year. So things may look really different for you and your family. That's okay. This is the situation where we're going to tell you, come talk to us, and we can see if we can make some adjustments. We are going to ask, though, that you have the FAFSA already done, because I can't make any adjustments out of thin air. I have to be able to see a FAFSA to kind of see what's going on, to see if any adjustments can be made. We definitely can't make any promises. We definitely can't say, like, oh, in this situation, everybody gets this. It is a very individualized review of the circumstances of the student, of what's going on, to see if we can adjust aid in any capacity. And this is also true of any school that your student may be looking at. If you if you have a circumstance at one school, I encourage you to talk to all of your schools. And we're talking about things that have impacted finances. So these are things like a job loss, or they cut my hours. I've been furloughed without pay for several months. I have unusual medical expenses because of, whatever the reason. So those are things, expenses to my family, that we can make those adjustmts for. I got divorced is another popular one that we see. So we can make adjustments because of that. You just need to come talk to us. I went back to our email, so you can email us directly or contact our financial aid office. And we are happy to walk you through, tell you what specific documentation we need. But again, we will not be able to do any adjustments until we see your FAFSA and your financial aid at first. So you do have to do your FAFSA first before we can make any adjustments.
Melissa and Marissa, can I jump in just really quick? I've seen a couple talent-based scholarship questions, and raise.me has come up a few times. Back to the slide.
Yes.
Where I'll talk through that. And Melissa and Marissa, jump in. I'm not saying this as eloquently as you would, but we do accept raise.me micro scholarships. So they are a great framework and great goals to work toward. But the way they work at Rollins is, if we offer you a higher merit scholarship through the admission office, than the micro scholarships that you have put together, then the merit scholarship that we offer will supersede that. So your micro scholarships won't stack on top of the merit scholarship that we offer. Am I saying that right, Melissa and Marissa? Okay.
Right. So the merit scholarship, if it's higher, it's going to trump that Raise Me funding that you've put together. So if you put together 10,000 and we're offering 24,000, you're not going to get 34,000. We would just offer you the 24,000, and that's it.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you. And then I know a few of you have asked about some of the talent-based scholarships, so I'll just kind of quickly walk through the bullet points there. Athletic scholarships, many of our athletic programs at Rollins do offer athletic scholarships, but you'll have to work directly with the coach to secure those. So all of our coaches are listed on our athletics website, so be sure to reach out directly to them to inquire about spots on the team and athletic scholarships. We do have arts scholarships as well, so music, art, and theater. Music and theater, you need to audition for those. So you don't have to audition at Rollins to just be a music major or to just be a theater major, but if you are interested in those talent-based scholarships in those programs, they do require an audition process. And then finally, the Bonner Scholars Program, Melissa mentioned this earlier. Great program if you are really interested and excited about service. It's a cohort-based program, fantastic if you're really passionate about service. That is a separate application process, but when you apply to Rollins, we'll communicate about when that application opens up. Typically, that'll open early in the spring. Just be on the lookout in your email for when we open up that process. Yeah, and right now that I'm opening some questions, sorry. Do we have a couple more minutes? Is that okay? Yeah, okay. I'll just answer these really quick since so yeah, where can you find more information about auditioning for music talent scholarships? And are they open to students who don't major in music? So you'll work directly with our music department. So Madison, if you want to reach out directly to me, I can connect you with our music department. They can set up audition processes pretty seamlessly, but they are not open to students who don't major in music. Melissa and Marissa, are there any minors that are able to get music scholarships, or is it just for majors?
I don't believe, don't quote me on this 100%, but I don't believe that there are scholarships for minors, only because most of these scholarships have requirements of being part of a number of ensembles per semester, and that requires a bunch of hours that a minor, a student minoring in music would just not be required to take. So that's my impression. But like Elisa said, because these scholarships are awarded by the music department, then they have the criteria for each. So that's something that you want to discuss with them directly.
Yeah.
My advice on this is just exactly what Marissa said. If you have questions about a specific departmental scholarship, talk to that department because they can tell you a lot more information about it. How they kind of work at Rollins is they determine who, for athletics and these other talent-based awards, they determine who wins what award, and they let financial aid know. We put it on the aid offer. We don't have any say in determining this kid's getting a soccer scholarship or this kid's getting a theater scholarship. We have any other questions, financial aid or admission questions that we want to talk about tonight? I'm going back through the chat to see if anybody sent one to me specifically that I missed.
So it looks like Charlotte had just asked about is the amount of money a student's awarded from Florida Bright Futures contingent upon the FAFSA information? That's a good question.
It's not. You do not have to do a FAFSA to receive Florida Bright Futures. The only Florida aid that you would need to do a FAFSA for to receive is the Florida Student Assistance Grant if you are a needy family. But the EASE grant and the Bright Futures do not require a FAFSA.
All right, I just see one. I'm not sure if it was answered, but do we have any scholarships? Let's see. Do we have any special scholarships for immigrants is what the question itself says, Elisa. Anything special about scholarships for international students or with a different nationality?
Sure. Yeah, so our international students are considered for the same partial merit scholarships as our domestic students are. So same thing, you don't have to apply separately for those. We also consider international students to be invited to our full scholarship interview weekend. And so in turn, international students can be awarded our Alphon scholarship. Every year we award several Alphon scholarships to some of our international students. So definitely those merit scholarship opportunities are open. In terms of financial aid, I think this may have been covered, but international students can also apply for financial aid through a special international financial aid application too. I don't know if Melissa and Marissa, if you want to add anything to that.
I don't think so. I think that covers it. Yeah, I don't know. Marissa, did you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. You said it perfectly.
Yeah, you did a great job on that one. You want to come work in our office?
I like admissions.
I do have a question here that I want to answer that I was asked a little while ago that I missed. So sorry about that, but I think it's some other people may be thinking this too. If I have multiple students attending, does that have an impact on my aid? There's a couple things here. One, we do not have a discount for having multiple students attend Rollins. Each student gets their own education, so each student's going to be charged for that. But having multiple students in college at the same time is it's a helpful thing on the FAFSA itself, because what it will do is it will take that EFC, that expected family contribution, and it will divide it into the number of kids that you have attending school. So let's say, for example, that your EFC at the end was 30,000 and you have 3 kids in college at the same time, your EFC for each kid will be 10,000. There's going to be some variables based on the student side of things, but in general, that kind of gives you a ballpark. So instead of having one kid at an EFC of 30,000, now their EFC is 10,000, they may be eligible for additional aid because of that. Also keep in mind though that as those kids graduate, then that division gets smaller and smaller to eventually you just have one, unless they're all graduating at the same time. So hopefully that answers that. Any other questions that we see out there?
So we are still getting a couple. I think they may still keep coming. So happy to stay longer, but also if Melissa, you could put up the slide with our contact information.
Yep.
It's been said before, but even if you are not considering Rollins as part of your choices, we get questions from different high school students that we present to and different families. We're happy to help you in your college process, but if Rollins is one of your choices, then even better.
So let's say this will officially conclude our presentation here. If you have additional questions, I know I can stay on the line for a little bit longer. I'm going to turn off the recorder probably. So feel free to jump off here if you want to, but feel free to stick around if you haven't gotten your question answered. You still have some questions for us.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Have a wonderful evening.